Hello world from Oktopost headquarters. This is Radically Transparent, Oktopost's original podcast show on B2B Marketing Now. I'm your host today, Jennifer Gutman, Director of Social Strategy, and in most episodes of this podcast, we feature B2B marketing leaders who share their radically transparent truths behind being a modern-day marketer and what it takes to grow ideas, take risks, and impact change. Joining me on this episode of Radically Transparent is Mike Dickerson, CEO of ClickDimensions. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
Doing great. Here in Tel Aviv, you may have heard we just got out of lockdown, so we're quite excited. And I really thank you for joining the show. I know our audience is thrilled for this episode. They know a lot about our partnership. We're going to dive into it. But I thought to begin with, I was going to open with an easy, radically transparent question and knowing that you have quite the background, right? With 25 years experience in the technology industry and specialties and growth strategy and new business development, organizational transformation, which is a huge buzz today in global management. I really couldn't think of anyone better to be leading ClickDimensions and on our show today. So would you be able to give us a radically transparent yet brief look into your professional journey and how you found yourself as CEO of ClickDimensions?
Sure. Well, there's two ways to tell the story. The simple story is that Excel KKR, one of the top performing private equity firms of the last 20 years, found me through a recruiter. Oh. And I was part of an executive team of a New York Stock Exchange firm that we had taken private in 2015. So I had some experience with private equity investors, but I'd also run an email marketing business for several years. And I had some experience in two different companies partnering with and competing with Microsoft, which was an important part of this story. So that's the simple story. The more fun story has to do with underwear.
Oh, okay. So we want to get radically transparent about underwear, or we want to save that for a different episode?
I can save that for later, but it's a good story.
Sounds good. We'll check back in there. So with that, as you know, and many of our listeners know, the famous question we ask every guest, and I'm going to ask it to you now. Mike, what keeps you up at night professionally?
Yeah, so, that's a pretty standard question. And I'd like to sort of come at it this way. I think I'd like to say that I worked a lot on that in 2020. 2020 was an interesting year in a lot of ways. And what I'm going to say is that I think if something keeps you up at night, that's not a good thing. That means something else is out of balance. So what I sort of would like to say for a 2021 perspective is that I look at more what gets me excited in the morning. And there are a couple of challenges that get me excited. One is helping companies make the transition from, to being a digitally first company. And this is and dealing with virtual selling. And it's not easy for a lot of our customers. It involves reimagining the interactions along the way. It involves learning new motions. It involves reallocating your spend from bottom of the funnel to top of the funnel. But this is particularly relevant for us at ClickDimensions, not only because of the products that we sell and the services we offer, but it's true of our company. We built this company through great partnerships with Microsoft Dynamics partners who implement CRM and Salesforce automation. And their business has certainly been impacted by the inability to go meet with people. Very often, folks are a little bit shy on replacing their entire CRM without actually meeting a human. And so it's caused us to really look at how we find new leads and how we win new business. So in a very real sense, we are who we serve. So that looking through the challenges, which aren't just technology, they are change management, sales enablement, people enablement, and how to do that for our own company is important, and how we do it for our customers, many of whom aren't big giant companies with huge budgets, people who are really sort of in a situation where they've got to figure out this digital first to survive, and they don't have a ton of resources to do it.
So just I mean, I have so much questions, so I'm just going to funnel this in. So I think what I'm hearing and where this becomes complicated when you're putting something together digital first for those who really have never stepped foot in that space. And then you brought up an interesting point as well, where this is right, who buys a CRM without being able to meet with the person that's going to be running the project to do a digital first entire transformation. And transformation can be a very big undertaking and very uncertain for many who have never gone through something like this before. And it also feels like the bar of engagement is so much higher for brands today, yet we don't have the ability to be, as you said, right, in front of somebody face to face due to the current climate. So could you share with us maybe how ClickDimensions is currently interacting with buyers or keeping the top of the funnel, if you will, fruitful, right? How do you keep that momentum going and staying relevant today when a big part of what you do and building that trust and being a trusted partner kind of has been, pivoted or shifted to the side?
Yeah. So I think you're spot on in that the bar to win people's attention is higher than it's ever been. And that battle for that attention is fierce. People are crazy busy trying to adapt to their businesses to the new context. They're zoomed out, running from meeting to meeting to meeting without ever getting up from their desk. They're bombarded with digital messages by people who can no longer do prospecting in person. And we know that because we see our volumes way up. So that's the context that every person is dealing with. And oh, by the way, when you're selling B2B, those individuals are typically no longer in the same location with their colleagues with whom they need to make a decision whether to pursue buying a product or whatever or not. That's typically, B2B is usually a group buy. So within that context, there are really two things that we return to. And the first is we're sort of lucky in that our business is particularly relevant to everybody right now. And we have a saying internally, we are who we serve. We take advantage of the fact that we understand that shifting to digital first and clearing that attention bar is difficult. So we say, imagine if you are in that context, and it's easier for us to do because we are in that context. The second thing that we try and do to overcome that sort of higher bar for attention is that we really specifically and consciously try to add value in each interaction. That sounds sort of cliche.
Yeah, you're right. Like everyone, add value. I think we hear it all the time as marketers, as sales, add value.
So I think there are a couple things that we do in that, and it's every interaction, whether it's digital, whether it's human, whether it's hybrid, and that's very important. The human followed up with the digital assets is super important right now. Is we train all of our people on Jill Conrath's SNAP rules. And we really focus atomically on each interaction. Yes, we string them together in a coherent conversation, but we really focus atomically on each interaction. Make it simple. Make sure that you or your company are invaluable to the person on the other line. Again, you got to do this in your short time, simple, concise sort of message that you're trying to communicate. Align with the objectives of the person that you're dealing with, and then find a way to try and make interacting with us a priority. So, simple is, SNAP, SNAP, simple, invaluable, align, and priority. We try and make every digital and every human interaction that way. So that just keeps us focused, but it's a challenge.
I like that, the SNAP, and I think, right, I can see the focus, but then that starts getting me thinking about, right, if you think about an organization, you have all sorts of roles and experiences, and prior to 2020, and I mean, if you look even at marketing, right, how much marketing technology has changed and the role of marketing in general, do marketers need to be more technical or should they be more creative? In your opinion, what do you think is the best way to teach, I won't say old folks, but folks, new tricks, if you will, to optimize their current and old technology, but also to stay relevant, right? We're talking about that, bringing kind of that fine balance between digital and human interaction. How can you teach folks how to do and use these new pieces of technology?
Yeah, well, the new pieces of technology is one part, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think the more difficult thing is, I believe, and we believe as a company very strongly, that one of the key things that has to happen in this moment is that you can't think of sales and marketing as two aligned units. You really have to think about unified sales and marketing, because the person on the other end doesn't care that marketing is thinking this and the salesperson is thinking that. They're dealing with one company. And that's really hard, because budgets and professional development and turf wars have built up. And I think that's a false context, or false narrative when people say we want to align sales and marketing. We really believe that you got to unify sales and marketing behind what the interactions of the customer journey. So within that context, how do you go about teaching people that mindset, and how do you teach them the technology?
Yeah.
And we get we're lucky because of the space that we're in. If we were selling hospital software, great business, but that's not ours. We wouldn't have the ability to do what I'm about to say, which is every person that we interact with is a digital consumer in their private life. So we can always connect back to something that they bought recently, or a great experience they have, something that they did with Amazon and how that experience went, and why they chose this thing versus that thing. And when were they first aware of it? And so we can go back to their digital consumer experience and say, now imagine if you could do those same things to a business, and what's different about B2C than selling to a business. And that's a really easy way to get into the conversation. And pretty quickly, you can find with everybody digital experiences that were fantastic, and ones just absolutely sucked.
Totally. And kind of speaking of the, we spoke skill set, mindset, tool set, and I'm thinking of the employees of ClickDimensions, and I think you guys do this really well. You guys are a very well-oiled machine, very large, and we get the privilege to work with a number of your employees. But how are you keeping your current teams productive? And can you share some words of wisdom out there for us marketing and sales leaders listening in when it comes to driving highly effective and productive remote teams? And I think, if I remember correctly, you can keep me honest, when we would visit your offices in Atlanta, it was a really interesting then, before pandemic, setup that you had almost already a hybrid model in place. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe give some words of wisdom to those listening in to keeping teams productive?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple things that we've done. Some, I think we were lucky enough to start before the pandemic, and some that we've really, sort of adapted as we have endured this. So one of the things that we really followed is there's sort of a recipe that Patrick Lencioni, who wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Death by Meeting, and a bunch of stuff. He wrote a book called The Advantage, and talks about 4 disciplines for creating a healthy organization. And they are pretty simple. Create a cohesive executive team, create clarity, over communicate clarity, and reinforce that clarity. And the clarity is around things like, what's our purpose? What do we do? How are we going to succeed in the market? What's most important right now, and who does what? And how do we behave amongst each other? And so we had really started driving those things into the business as we were, getting through the second half of 2019. And as the pandemic came along, we said, wow, this is a pretty serious thing. And then back in March of last year, it wasn't clear. Was the banking system going to shut down? Was, what was going to happen? And we really concentrated on bringing the company together and the health of the company. And we said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to protect the health of the company and protect your futures, as number one. And then as things came out of that, I remember distinctly, we went from the having an internal meeting where I said, look, we're past the adrenaline phase, and we're about to get into the fatigue and the mental health phase. And that was last May. And I don't think we realized that it would be this long. I'm glad we did. So there are things that we've done, particularly, when I think about our sales organization, we really focus on our one-on-one meetings. We make people use video. Now everybody's comfortable doing that. We do team meetings regularly. We get people to do presentations. People like to, first of all, it gives them something to focus on other than stuff that's scary out in the real world. And it gives them a spotlight and they get to be on TV. And so we do that. And then we try and find a couple of fun things here and there.
I like that. Maybe we'll bring that to Oktopost to see how our CEO, Daniel, wants to have some of that. I think that's a great idea. And I think just keeping conscious of the time, and, you had me peaked with the underwear story. So my last question for you today is one that we ask every guest, again, because it's interesting, right? We can find so much about you, Mike, on Google, on LinkedIn. We can see your achievements, accomplishments, your background. It's pretty powerful stuff. And I was hoping that today you might be able to share something about yourself that we are not able to learn from your LinkedIn profile or the millions of podcasts, blogs, articles, or everything else that I did my due diligence before this episode. If you could share with us today.
Well, okay. So, all right. Well, I'll go back to the first question you asked about the underwear. I once owned 6 million pair of underwear.
6 million? Like you had 6 million pairs of underwear? Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
So the first serious company I started was in college, and we made apparel with pro sports teams in college logos on it. And our first product was men's boxer shorts. This was in the mid to late 80s. Okay. And it was a fad and it took off. And that ultimately led me to ClickDimensions in this way. As I was in the last years of that company before I sold it, so this would have been 97, 98, I started to get fascinated by this e-commerce thing. We had stores that we sold to all over the country, but University of Michigan bookstore was where you would sell University of Michigan apparel. But there were lots of Wolverine alumni that lived all over the place. And if you could figure out how to get to them without having to go to Ann Arbor, that would be really interesting. So this internet sounded pretty cool. And so I started researching and investing, and had a team all lined up to spend over $1 million building an e-commerce site so that we could sell alumni paraphernalia and see if we could sell online. Back then, we had no idea whether. In the 80s, that's like very ahead of its time. No, this would have been this was 97.
97, okay.
Yeah, and so then, just as we're about ready to push this project to go, some people that I knew came to me and said, "There's a company called Fig Leaves that is raising money to sell underwear on the internet." They believe, I think Amazon had just started. They said, books and, underwear, everybody needs underwear and everybody knows their size and this is going to work. And I thought, wow, it's a lot cheaper for me to invest in this company than spend $1 million and maybe fail on my own. So I invested a small amount of money in a company called Fig Leaves, and the chief operating officer of that company was a lady named Rachel Spasser, who is now a managing director at Excel KKR. And she was the lady that recruited me to come, run ClickDimensions.
Would you look at that? A small world.
That's a very small world. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. And I definitely would have never guessed that you had owned at one point 6 million pairs of underwear. My next one, do you have any left, or are they all sold out?
Yeah, I have some. I sold the business, so I'm no longer involved. I'm on some of the original historical literature. The company's still doing very well, and my wife it's now a division of a larger company, and my wife is the number 2 executive at that company. So she's been working there for close to 30 years.
That's fantastic, Mike. Thank you so much. I wish you much health, and I wish ClickDimensions a super successful 2021. And I'm sure we'll cross paths again.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks for tuning in to the Radically Transparent podcast, brought to you by Oktopost, the only social media management and employee advocacy platform architected for B2B. I'm Jennifer Gutman, your host and director of social strategy here at Oktopost. And if you love today's show, we'd love if you subscribe, rate, and give a raving review wherever you get your podcasts. For more discussion on B2B social media marketing, be sure to follow Oktopost on LinkedIn. And of course, to gain access to all our free social media marketing and employee advocacy resources, head on over to our website, www.oktopost.com. Until next time.